to Trump's Truth Social account that depicts him and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes.
I think it's important to recognize that the majority of the American people find this behavior deeply troubling. There's this sort of clown show that's happening in social media and on television. There doesn't seem to be any shame about this among people who used to feel like you had.
Gather around everybody, because this CNN panel right here is one of those conversations that sounds like it is about manners and history lessons, but is actually about something that cuts to the bone of what American democracy is and whether it is going to survive the moment we are in. This is CNN Newsnight with Abby Phillip, and the panel is fired up from the first second. We've got Tezlyn Figaro, who comes in with zero patience for the Go high crowd and has some very specific names to drop about who is doing it right. We've got Kevin Leary, who wants to talk policy and pretends the behaviour of the people making the policy is somehow separate from the policy itself. And we've got a George W., Bush President's Day essay that is either a beautiful tribute to a founding father or the most carefully worded subtweet in the history of American politics, depending on how honest you are willing to be about what you just read. Oh, and we have got a racist video posted to the former President of the United States depicting Barack and Michelle Obama as apes on Truth Social by the current president. And somehow that is the part some people want to debate the framing of. This channel does not debate the framing of racism. We name it and we move forward. Subscribe right now and let us get into it.
To Trump's Truth Social account that depicts him and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes.
I think it's important to recognize that the majority of the American people find this behavior deeply troubling. There's this sort of clown show that's happening in social media and on television. There doesn't seem to be any shame about this among people who used to feel like you had to have some sort of decorum and a sense of propriety and respect for the office, right? So that's been lost.
So Tezlyn, is he right that most Americans are not down with this stuff?
I can't tell. What he is right about is that it is a clown show, and it's been lost. And unfortunately, I don't think it's ever coming back. I think that whether it's especially Democrats, have to adjust to the moment. You know, this idea of wanting this bipartisan, let's all get along, let's hold hands, it's over with, Abby, to be quite honest with you. If they do not put people in, I say this all the time, if they do not fight fire with fire and match the same energy on the other side, they're going to continue to get the table ran on them. And that's just the bottom facts. Content creators drive elections now. Podcast hosts drive elections now. The idea that I can just sit back and always be on the defense opposed to the offense is over with. I think that era's over with, and I would like to see leaders adjust.
So here's what Piers Morgan says in response to this. Preposterously disingenuous nonsense by Obama, the woke left has been the single meanest, angriest, exclusive, us, them, divisive movement in history. In history, he says. I would like to
really, the people that are like, love who you want to love, be who you want to be, read what you want to read. That's the most
They're not mean enough, if you ask me.
Group in history.
They should be meaner.
I feel
Democrats
like
get meaner.
I think the thing with the Obama thing is that it's such a sky is blue moment. The fact that it was posted was so deeply and disgustingly racist. Everyone should be able to say that without caveat. The fact that Obama had to make a statement on it that wasn't just accepting Donald Trump's apology, to me, is appalling. And I just feel like everyone who's justifying what he did should be, and used to be, shunned by civilized society.
Well, if I can ask both of you, I think Barack Obama took the high road there, right? Would you like to see him get lower, to your point earlier?
I would
like to see him be meaner?
No. I think President Obama is who he is. He also talked about, which I know we'll discuss later on, how people have aged out. Their time is over.
He's right about that, yeah.
I think his era and the class era is over. I think you have other leaders, such as a Jasmine Crockett, for example, that is fighting fire with fire, that's giving it right back to Trump the same way he dishes it out. You have Governor Newsom, who is doing the same thing, whether you like his policy or not. We are now in an era where now people have to deal with it on a different level. So no, I think that the going high is over with. I think you get low, and matter of fact, get a little bit lower. And that's what people are responding to. So to keep sitting back saying, oh, I'm appalled and I just can't believe it. No, I don't. They put it on the table. It was a racist video. It was a racist trope that has been going on since the beginning, the inception of this country. It wasn't anything new to see black people as monkeys. That's been happening. What's happening now is on the forefront for everybody to see and discuss. So I think now you have to have a shift in leadership, or you're going to continue to see the same thing.
So former President George W. Bush, this is President's Day, by the way, so he has a piece out on Substack that says, our first president could have remained all-powerful but chose not to twice. In doing so, he set a standard for all presidents to live up to. Washington modeled what it means to put the good of the nation over self-interest and selfish ambition. He embodied integrity and modeled why it's worth aspiring to. He carried himself with dignity and self-restraint. honoring the office without allowing it to become invested with near mythical powers. That's what back in the day we would have called a subtweet, directed at one Donald Trump. And it's not, look, it's not a new observation about the founding father, but I just wonder, I mean, is he right that Trump is really kind of pushing back and defying the George Washington model for the presidency?
Well, I read the essay and I thought it was a wonderful essay celebrating George Washington, who's an incredible founding father. And then I saw the headlines about Bush subtly jabs Trump. I didn't pick up on that at all from the essay. I think he's honoring a founding father on President's Day. I really, unless you really hate Trump, I don't think you would interpret it with that anti-Trump rhetoric.
Do you see the contrast? I mean, do you see the contrast?
You know, I kind of buy into the idea that the office itself is above all the rhetoric and all the... George Washington didn't have to deal with social media. There was none. And so those words are very inspiring, but we're in different times now. And I think the important thing to do, at least from my perspective, is I watch all this, whatever you want to call it, and I ask myself, is there any policy in there? Because really what the American people want is some guidance on what is coming next that affects their lives. And I think it's important to respect the office. I always have, and I'm trying to be bipartisan when I say this. But there's a lot of things that we focus on that really have nothing to do with need more respect. I deal with them. I've got all these companies with people struggling to survive, and we hit them with crazy stuff. And it doesn't help put cereal in the bowl.
Well, I think that may be why people are wondering why Trump keeps wanting to name things after himself, why he's focused on building ballrooms.
That's what all real estate guys do.
Can I say this?
Yeah, but I mean, this is
not what all presidents do, and I think that's the point about the Washington thing, right?
Contrast.
It's the thing about George Washington.
Forget about social media. George Washington could have decided to model himself after a king.
Can I say
He
this?
didn't do it.
Because George Washington is long gone. Representative Garcia, shout out to him last week. I put that one post on my post. I only have about 200,000 followers. Over 15 million people looked at that post from Representative Garcia, was giving it back to Pam Bondi the same way she was dishing it out. Things that still need to be handled, food on the table, all of those things. Democrats want to see a fighter. Decorum is over with. Clutching of the pearls.
Who would
going
that be?
high.
Anybody in mind?
Yeah, I just named them. Representative Garcia, Jasmine Crockett, who I know Republicans love talking about 24 hours a day. Governor Newsom, who Donald Trump can't seem to stop talking about.
Newsom?
Yeah, he gives them to her real good. He makes y'all real upset. Tezlyn Figaro here that loves giving it to you the same way he
on a
gives you.
bipartisan basis, you want to put that guy in charge of America?
No,
He can't
I didn't
even
say
fix
that.
California.
No, I didn't say that. I said bring the same energy.
I
Two
like that
different
guy,
things.
but he can't manage his way out of a wet paper bag.
Well, he sure got Trump talking 24 hours a day.
I think the point about that George W. Bush essay is that it's a president looking back and being inspired by his predecessors. And I think that what we're looking at here is this lack of humility that we have from our current president. And what George W. Bush was saying, it's important to have some set of humility when you are leading a country. That if you have nothing to learn, then you learn nothing. Like Washington did a lot of great things, but I think the most important thing he did was willingly give up power when he didn't have to. And I think the contrast is we currently have a president who will try to keep power when he is supposed to.
Let us start with the racist video because we are not going to spend 30 seconds on it and move on like it is just another news item in a busy cycle. Donald Trump posted a video to his Truth Social account depicting Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as apes. That is not an edgy joke. That is not provocative political commentary. That is one of the oldest and most vicious racist tropes in American history. The dehumanization of black people through animal imagery, deployed by the sitting president of the United States against his predecessor and his predecessor's wife, on purpose, with no apology, with no consequence from his party, and with a significant portion of his media ecosystem either defending it, ignoring it, or finding a way to make the story about Obama's response instead of Trump's action. Tezlyn Figaro is right that this is not new. She says it plainly, and it needs to be heard plainly. Comparing black people to monkeys and apes has been happening in this country since its inception. It was used to justify slavery. It was used to justify segregation. It was used to justify every form of systemic dehumanization this country has inflicted on black Americans across 4 centuries. When Trump posts that video, he's not being edgy. He's reaching into the deepest and most poisonous well of American racism and pulling up a bucket for his base to drink from. And everyone who saw it and said nothing, everyone who saw it and shrugged, everyone who saw it and found a way to make it about something other than what it was is complicit in normalizing something that should never be normal. Barack Obama's response was measured, dignified, presidential in the way that word used to mean something. He called it a clown show. He noted that the sense of decorum and propriety that used to be a baseline expectation for people in public life has been lost. And he is correct on both counts. But here is where Tezlyn Figaro makes her most important point and where Lucas Stowe is going to stand with her firmly. Decorum is over. Not because it was not valuable. Not because it did not matter. but because decorum requires reciprocity. It requires that both sides of a political conflict operate within a shared framework of basic norms and mutual respect. And one side of this conflict abandoned that framework completely. You cannot bring a handshake to a knife fight and call it the high road. You are just going to get stabbed while congratulating yourself on your manners. The go high strategy. Let us be honest about what it produced. Democrats went high during the first Trump term and lost the narrative on immigration, on the courts, on the economy, on culture. They went high during the 2024 campaign and lost the White House. They went high while Republicans stole a Supreme Court seat, packed the courts with ideologues, gutted voting rights protections, and dismantled regulatory frameworks that protected ordinary people from corporate abuse. Going high is a beautiful philosophy for a world where your opponent shares your commitment to the rules of the game. It is a losing strategy for a world where your opponent has set the rulebook on fire and is using it to light the next one. Figaro names the people who are getting it right. Jasmine Crockett, Gavin Newsom, Representative Garcia. These are politicians who have figured out what content creators and podcast hosts figured out years ago. People do not just want to be informed. They want to feel like somebody on their side is willing to fight. They want to see their representatives get angry on their behalf. They want to know that the people they send to Washington are not going to get steamrolled by a movement that has no interest in governing in good faith and every interest in using power to consolidate more power. Kevin O'Leary's policy-only argument deserves a direct response because it is the kind of thing that sounds reasonable until you think about it for more than 30 seconds. O'Leary says he focuses on policy. He says he respects the office. He says a lot of what we focus on has nothing to do with the average person's day. And here is the fundamental problem with that framework. You cannot separate the behavior of a leader from the policy they produce because the behavior is the policy. When a president posts racist content about his predecessor, that is a policy signal. It tells every federal agency, every law enforcement body, every judge, every bureaucrat exactly what kind of America this administration is building and who it considers fully human and who it does not. When a president dismantles the norms around the peaceful transfer of power, that is not just bad manners. That is a policy position about what democracy is for and who it belongs to. Telling people to tune out the behavior and focus on the policy is like telling someone to ignore the smoke and focus on whether the building is still standing. The smoke is the information, the George W. Bush essay. Let us be real about what this is. George W. Bush sat down on President's Day and wrote a piece praising George Washington specifically for his integrity, his self-restraint, his decision not to treat the presidency like a monarchy, and most importantly, his willingness to give up power when he was supposed to, on President's Day in 2026. With Donald Trump and the White House having already attempted to overturn one election and having spent the intervening years telling his base that the presidency should be permanent and that the peaceful transfer of power is optional when you believe the other side cheated. O'Leary says he read the essay and thought it was a wonderful tribute to a founding father and did not see any jab at Trump at all. Either Kevin O'Leary is the least perceptive reader in America, or he is doing what he always does, which is provide cover for Trump's behavior by pretending not to notice it. Because the essay is not subtle. It is as subtle as a foghorn. Bush is not writing about George Washington because he woke up on President's Day feeling nostalgic about the 18th century. He is writing about the specific qualities that Washington embodied that the current occupant of the White House does not. Integrity, self-restraint, putting the good of the nation over selfish ambition, willingly giving up power when he was supposed to. That last one is the one that lands like a hammer. Washington could have been king. The American people would have let him. He had the military loyalty, the public adoration, and the political capital to declare himself something permanent and unchallengeable. And he chose not to. Twice. He walked away from power because he understood that the republic he helped build was more important than his own continuation in office. That is the standard he set. That is the model every president since has been measured against. And then there is Donald Trump, who lost an election in 2020, spent 2 months trying to overturn it through the courts and through pressure on state officials and through a coordinated campaign to convince his vice president to refuse to certify the results. And when all of that failed, sent a mob to the Capitol, who has spent every day since laying the groundwork for a political environment in which the peaceful transfer of power is treated as conditional rather than sacred, who names federal buildings after himself, proposes extending his own term, and treats the presidency as a vehicle for personal enrichment and personal vengeance rather than public service. Bush did not have to say Trump's name. He did not need to. The contrast he was drawing was visible from space. Here is the bigger picture that this panel is really about, even if it does not quite get all the way there. America is in a fight right now about what kind of country it is going to be, not in some abstract philosophical sense, in a very concrete, immediate sense about whether the institutions and norms that have held this democracy together for 2.5 centuries are going to survive a movement that has decided those institutions and norms are only worth respecting when they produce the outcomes that movement wants. The racist video is part of that fight. The George Washington essay is part of that fight. The debate about whether Democrats should go high or get low is part of that fight. And Tezlyn Figaro is right. You do not win this fight with decorum. You win it with energy, with clarity, with the willingness to name what is happening without euphemism, and with leaders who are not afraid to get in the mud with people who have decided the mud is where they live. George Washington gave up power when he was supposed to. That single act may have done more to establish American democracy than anything else in the founding era. The fact that we're sitting here in 2026 debating whether the current president would do the same thing tells you exactly how far we have fallen from that standard and exactly how much work there is left to do. Stay angry, stay focused. Stay in this fight because the people trying to dismantle these institutions are counting on exhaustion, and they are counting on the decent majority of Americans to eventually decide it is too much and look away. Do not look away. If this channel keeps you looking, subscribe right now, share this video, and bring somebody else into the conversation. I'm Lucas Stoey, and I will see you in the next one.